Hey, Steve, tell us a little bit about our guest, Mark Pukita, and how he got here. He is in studio. We always like in-studio visits because we could look him in the eye, look him in the face, and see if they twitch at the questions or whatever. But we like people in studio.
Yeah, so Mark's here. Mark's a former businessman, successful businessman. Threw his hat in the ring to run for Senate, and that's U.S. Senate. And we met several weeks ago at, what was that event? Where
Political
was
Summit.
the
Ohio Political Summit.
Political Summit. And he was one of the candidates that showed up versus some of the candidates that didn't show up. And we listened to what he said, and I liked a lot of things that he was saying. And so my question to him was, would you come on the show? And he agreed, and so here he is. And without further ado, I would just open it up. And Mark, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and why you're doing what you're doing?
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, George. At the end of 2019, I realized I'd lived the American dream. I sold a business that I'd been growing for over a quarter of a century. And, when I looked at the numbers, I'd done better than my parents had. And I'd recently had a grandchild, and I looked at him and I thought there's just no way, if we keep going in the same direction we're going right now, that there would be an opportunity for him. And now his younger brother, who was born a week ago yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. To have that same opportunity. And as I was thinking that, it was almost like one of those lightning bolts from God. I'm watching Fox News, and there's Rob Portman, and I realized that he hadn't done anything that Ohioans sent him to Washington to do. And I just decided then and there that I was going to primary him. So I'm the first and only, and forever will be the only candidate that declared to and registered with the FEC to run against Rob Portman when he was still the incumbent, which, as you know, is it's hard enough being an outsider, an insurgent citizen candidate, but to run against an incumbent is extremely difficult.
That's a heavy lift.
Yeah, it's a very heavy lift. I mean, we look at this, realistically, it's a moonshot, but if there's any time a moonshot candidate can win, the folks that I have working with me, some who've been involved with presidential campaigns in the past, said that 2022 is the year because people are just fed up.
So let's talk about that. You have an organization, you have people that are advising you, or you have campaign manager, communication director, stuff like that?
So I've got a campaign manager, Robert Gray, a young, recent master's graduate in political strategy from Akron. Very, very smart, a young adult. I've got some folks that are in the background that have been in other campaigns that are extremely conservative. Some have worked with, like the Romney campaign back in 2008. And then I've got a couple of consultants that we'll talk about in the future, but right now we really don't want to disclose to our opposition who they are.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But they're working more on issues like critical race theory and getting people to run, conservatives to run for school board spots. You'll hear more about that probably tomorrow and Wednesday. If you go to my website, there's a banner. It's not tied to the menu yet because we don't want to make it a big deal. But if you go to the website, the third scroll banner will be about education, and you can go to that. We're going to ask people to take a pledge and really get involved and show them how they can get on the school board.
And what is the website?
So the website, the easiest way to go to it is Mark, M-A-R-K, 4, Ohio.com. So that's Mark, 4, Ohio.com. And we've got a number of different domains that point.
Mm-hmm. And people can donate there if they want to.
They can donate there as well.
Okay.
Believe it or not, that's the first thing that comes up when you get to the website. We really have not started. We're just starting to raise money. I've been self-funding the campaign and will continue to do that for a while. But we wanted to explain to people what our mission was and what our platform was and basically give them something before we ask them for something. So that was our strategy. We've taken some criticism from other candidates, like, you're not raising any money. And I'm like, well, That's because it's my money, and that hasn't shown up on the reports yet, but will very well soon will, and it'll be, probably close to or over six figures for sure.
So I've got a burning question. I know George was going to ask this, but I'll just jump in. So you're going into a statewide race. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're starting out at the state level,
yep,
which is huge.
Yep.
How are you going to overcome the name ID? What's your plan? Because as a state candidate,
lack of name ID.
Yeah, you have the lack of name ID. How are you going to create that so that the voters will know who you are?
So that's a great question, and we've got a number of different pieces to the strategy. First, we've purchased a database of 3 million records of registered Republican voters and high propensity independent primary voters. So we're doing emails to them for name recognition and just association with my face, policies, website, things like that. We are actively going to events and contacting county GOP organizations, although they are pretty much unresponsive, and we can talk about that as much as you'd like. But
welcome to the Ohio Republican Party.
Yeah. And I've said to voters, I said, I'm going to promise you a lot of things, but two things I am going to promise you is, number one, I'm going to call out lies, and number two, I'm going to say the silent part out loud. So we've already created some friction, let's say, in Ashtabula, a lot of friction down in Claremont County. I think Butler County will be next. We're just going to take them one at a time. GOP grassroots supporters and voters are not happy with their county organizations for the most part, not all of them, but for most of them. And they've been unresponsive, and they're trying to cram down candidates through the endorsement process. And voters are basically telling me that the endorsement should come from the voter in the primary on May 3rd next year. And so we're going to continue to push for that, both at the state GOP level, the Ohio Republican Party, and then every one of the 88 counties as well.
Have you been able to talk to Bob Paduchek yet?
No, I went to church with Bob Paduchek, actually. So we've got similar heritage. Yeah. So, yeah. But I have to be honest with you. We're not spending a lot of time trying to court those people. We really aren't. I did the math one time in a presentation and said, how many people are involved in central committees at the county level and the state level? Let's just come up with a number. And they said, okay, let's just say it's 2,000. I said, so I can spend my time trying to court those people, many of whom I think there's a huge number of central committee members for the Ohio Republican Party that have already endorsed Jane Timken, who have never even spoken to me. Right. So I'm not going to convince them to change their mind. It's a lot easier for me to go out and get 2,000 voters to replace their vote, because ultimately in the primary, they've only got one vote too. So why would I spend my time trying to court someone that's kind of hitting my head against the wall?
Right. And in the process, Steve and I and many of our associates were definitely highly opposed to the state central committee endorsing anyone. Usually, let's say if Portman would have ran, they probably would have tried to endorse him, right, blah, blah, blah. But with 6 people running, and let's face it, the field is quite good. It's 4 businessmen or people in business versus more 2, I won't say full-time politicians, but more politically oriented in Jane Timken and Josh Mandel. But let me give the rundown here. It's you, Mike Gibbons, J.D. Vance, and Bernie Moreno. Now, I have spoken to everyone on this list, and I know a couple of them quite well, except Jane Timken, and I had met you at a speech out in, I believe it was out in Mentor, or will it be out that way?
Will be, yeah.
And yeah, number one, I liked your speech. I liked that.
Thanks.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more, about decentralizing the bureaucracies out of the federal government.
Yep.
Like you say, it's a ton of duplication, Department of Labor, OSHA, whatever. But And then afterward, I had spoken to the president of the Strongsville Republican Club, and I sent him an email that I didn't see you on the list, and you got into an email exchange, and you were able to speak there. But if I had not heard you out there, and I'm very active in a lot of groups, and I bebop around, and I think I helped you get a little bit into the Strongsville.
Absolutely.
But my only point is, let's say we'd come to the primary, and again, you're giving us a little groundwork how you're planning to get out your name. If I'd go to the May primary, and you could be the reincarnation of George Washington, if I don't know your name and I don't know what you stand for, my only point is, I think there's going to be a lot of money spent by everybody, and the powers that be say, "Oh, look, everybody's going to be wasting all this money because we're not coalescing around one person." But I look at this as spring training.
Absolutely.
You're warming up your fastball, you're getting your hitting and timing. So when the general comes, you'll be lean, mean, and aggressive. If and when you win the primary. Right. So I don't view it as a negative thing, the competition. And another thing I hate about the Republican Party is they always want to throw our borders open to competition from China and Pakistan and Bangladesh. But God forbid we have competition of ideas between six successful people over here. Right. I think it's great. I want to hear new ideas. I want to hear thoughts. I want to hear, what I can do better, because this will sharpen the knife, and this will get people hopefully excited about, hey, these are really great ideas. I'm in a quandary. All 6 of them are great. Who am I going to pick? Blah, blah, blah. So my point is, I think one has to break out with new ideas and new issues. And I think, and interesting enough, I have an office in Cleveland, and I live in Fairview Park. I've already received 7 mailings from Jane Timken at each location.
Right.
And I did bring in one of her letters. I thought it was interesting. Now, I'd like to read it as we're speaking and get some of your thoughts and comments on her comments, because I thought some of it was sort of odd. But anyhow, as you go through the states, how many have you visited? Most of the counties already in Ohio?
I've probably visited half of the counties in Ohio.
Right.
I bought an RV specifically. I'm serious. Bought an RV specifically to go to every county and as many towns and cities in those counties as possible. And obviously, we're doing events like this. We've had our own events. This week I'm in Medina Wednesday night. I'm in Tiffin Thursday night. I'm in Claremont County Friday night. I'm back up in Madison Saturday night. Some days we've got 2 events, and people say, wow, that's got to be tiring. I have not found it to be tiring. I've actually found it to be energizing, and quite honestly, it's been somewhat cathartic, because I feel like rather than sitting on the couch yelling at the TV every night, posting borderline, offensive things on social media, I'm actually doing something. So it is really energizing. And as I've told supporters, we're going to go right down to the wire on this. Don't expect me to drop out. That's just not me. Right. No matter what we do in terms of money or endorsements, but we're working on endorsements. You probably know what the number one endorsement is that we're going for and we're working for. And we're working on it from a number of different angles. Right. So, we're early on. I asked a friend of mine who's ex-military for his idea on what our strategy should be, and he's very involved in politics as well. And he goes, "You need to be firing every weapon you have in every direction there is, all the time." Right. That's basically what he said. And that's the way I've felt, to go and segment and say, oh, we're going to go to these red counties and build a base. I mean, we're going to do all that, but we're going to do everything else too. And we've got a very energized volunteer and supporter base, and we're slowly but surely convincing some people who said you've just got no chance. It's really interesting to see some of those people come over, especially when I just happened to videotape Jane Timken at a Dublin Republican Club meeting. And I videoed her more because I wanted to see an opponent present. because she and Josh and others aren't showing up at events. Mm-hmm. That event in Strongsville, they were committed to come, and they backed out because I don't know why. I mean, you'd have to ask them.
Josh was there.
Josh was
there. That's right. But Jane was supposed to be there. Jim Renacci was supposed to be there. Right. Mike Gibbons was supposed to be there. And they all dropped. They had committed.
Mike Gibbons was there. Jane wasn't there. Bernie Moreno wasn't there. J.D. Vance wasn't there.
Yeah.
So there, three of you were there.
No, Gibbons wasn't there.
Mike was not there.
I'm sorry. No, I had spoken to Mike, and he said he had and this was a couple of weeks, and there was supposedly the flap about Matt Gaetz coming there. But
right.
I talked to him about 3 weeks before, and he said he had a wedding out of town. So, but he would have been there.
Yeah. But we've had a number of other situations, like we're going to be with the Western Women's Club. I forget the actual name of the club, but
the Women of the Western Reserve or something.
Western Reserve, that's it. Yeah, on July 11th, and for example, Jane's not going to show up again. I guess I saw this morning, and the Paulding. It's very interesting how. Like I videoed her, and she basically blew it on a question about her support for Mike DeWine. I mean, she can't.
Yeah, I saw that video was posted.
Yeah. You posted it.
I posted it, and they took it. And as I said, that was a an unforced error, a self-inflicted wound, because I'm just taking the video thinking I'm going to go dissect it tonight and look through it and take notes and figure out what I could do that. That she's might be able to take something from her, and I didn't find much there. And I think that video might be the end of her campaign.
Well, she's pining for the same votes as Mike DeWine.
Correct.
She's pining for the swamp votes.
Yeah.
And Jack Windsor was on air with Bob France last week, and he was saying that depending on how this shakes out in the primary, it's going to be anywhere from 24 to 34%. Now, when you start talking those numbers and the conservative vote or the grassroots vote gets diluted between the other 6 conservative candidates, like in your race, or the other 2 or 3 in the governor's race, they have a pathway to win the primary because they have to be defeated in the primary.
Right.
So our concern, if Jane Tempkin's only getting 24% of the swamp vote, one of you guys got a shot. If they get 34%, I'm concerned that they're just going to breeze right through, and you guys are going to split up the rest of the vote. I'm not trying to. I'm not got one favor over the other. I'm just telling you the reality of how this works out.
That's absolutely the reality.
It's only arithmetic, right, Steve?
That's exactly right.
I think that we're going to see, though, for this primary, we're going to see turnout like we've never seen before.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And my vote target to win this thing is about 600,000 votes. That's a heavy lift, and that's a lot of votes in a primary.
But the other thing you need to be concerned about, maybe not so much in the Senate race, because I don't know who the Democrats are running in the Senate, but
Ryan.
Just Ryan?
Well, Nan Whaley, I guess.
Is there going to be a primary in the Democrat?
I think Nan Whaley is declared, and Ryan is declared, and I'm trying to think.
Here's something to consider. If they, in the governor race or in the Senate race, only run one candidate, those Democrats are free to step over and vote for Jane Tempkin and or vote for Governor DeWine in our primary.
Correct. And we're as I said, we're working on the high proclivity independent primary voters. We're working on them intently.
Our special guest is Mark Pukita. He's one of the declared candidates for the U.S. Senate primary seat being vacated by Senator Portman. We've been talking a little bit about politics and strategy. We're going to come back after the break and talk a little bit more, and then we're going to talk about issues and ideas and what separates. Hey, good evening. Back on Monday Night Roundtable with our special guest, Mark Pukita, Steve Krause in studio, and Don Larson roving around at the Planet Flag Brewery in Medina at the Best Parent Coalition Tour. Steve, was that the best idea to send Don Larson out to the brewery?
Absolutely.
I think those interviews will be a lot better. I think he got there about an hour early before it started at 6.
Yeah.
Maybe to get up some liquid courage, as they used to call it.
That might be a way to solve our employment problem with the whole unemployment,
Oh, sure.
overpayment.
But I want to mention here just before, Mark is a candidate for the U.S. Senate.
Right, absolutely. And just as a point of information, we've already had Josh Mandel on here. Mike Gibbons has been on here. Obviously, you're here. I've spoken to J.D. Vance personally. He'll be calling in to set up an appointment, so to speak, or a time slot. I've talked to Bernie Moreno's daughter, who's his campaign manager. Also, she's the fiancée of Max Miller. So God bless them. Hopefully they'll have a good marriage. And besides a political union, they'll have a marriage
There you
union,
go.
too. So that politics makes straight and bedfellows. And Jane Timken, our man Don Larson, has tried to contact the campaign several times, multiple times, and she has not responded, or her campaign has not responded. And so
Big surprise.
There's an invitation for Jane Timken to come on the show. I think we're usually pretty fair in our questions. I'll be honest, I like Mike Gibbons. We've probably known him since about the 2018 campaign. Good guy. And I've known Josh Mandel a long time. So, Mark, which brings me to the question. I haven't known you. Have you been around working in the political
I have not.
trenches? Okay.
I have not. Yeah,
Okay.
I have not. I'm a citizen candidate. Haven't run for office before.
Okay.
Not a career politician. Didn't go to an Ivy League school.
Okay.
Not a lawyer.
All right.
I'm a business person. Created literally thousands of jobs, and I created them. I wasn't an investor. I started a company out of my basement, my unfinished basement at the time, with $1,000 of my own capital, and funded it myself or with bank debt, no other equity from anybody. And grew it to about $100 million in revenue, about 800 employees at the time. I sold it in 2 pieces, 90% of it. I still have about 10% of it. Sold it in 2 pieces to my 2 key managers, a woman up in Detroit and a guy down in Columbus. And those 2 companies continue to grow and prosper. We didn't lay anybody off. Nobody got sacked, so to speak, in the sale. So it's for me, it was just the way I wanted to do it. We had offers that were better from outsiders, but we just have a great staff, and we paid them well and treated them well, and they did really extraordinary work for us. And I just could not, in all good conscience, do a transaction with an outsider and not know what was going to happen to those people.
That makes sense. And I admire, businessmen, business people that build up business from scratch, from the ground up, create a lot of jobs, because that's where wealth is created in real jobs, not the bureaucracy. So I didn't mean the question that way. And a couple of weeks ago, I went to the Strongsville Republican Club breakfast on a Saturday, and I met 2 elderly women. Very, very good conversation. Very good, patriotic people. And most importantly, they laughed at my jokes. But we were there, and they're probably in that 76 to 82 range, and they were saying, look, we have families, we have children. I'm a widow, I have grandchildren. And I've just basically become involved recently in the last, couple years, last year, but they did support President Trump in 2016. But they're like, well, we really never knew how to get involved besides voting, and that was good. And we didn't really think our country was on such a bad trajectory as, they've come out with the fangs and the claws in the last, year.
Stunning.
It's
stunning.
It's just incredible. Most people are shaking their heads and not believing it. And so we all have our work cut out for us. So, we do want to thank you for, number 1, starting a company and creating good jobs, and number 2, for looking at running for the U.S. Senate. Now, tell us, and again, when I heard your speech up in, I believe it was in Menor or Willoughby, you had talked about the bureaucracy in Washington, how a lot of those groups, such as the Department of Labor, OSHA, EPA, need to be canceled because they are duplicated pretty much at all state levels. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm a strict constitutionalist, and I believe that we've had a century or more of what I'd call constitutional creep and overreach by the federal government into powers that are expressly given to the states. So there are, as you know, there are about 3 or 4 powers given to the federal government, and that's it in the Constitution. Protect the country, our military, deal with foreign relations, and I like to say I would submit that that includes trade deals with other countries, managing interstate commerce and making sure that that's fair and consistent across all 50 states. And then even this is a stretch, a common currency. I mean, it talks about minting coinage and things like that. But I think we'd all agree that a common currency makes sense. We don't want to have a market of 50 different currencies within our own country. But that is it. And the 10th Amendment basically stressed that anything not in the Constitution, enumerated in the Constitution, goes specifically back to the states. And we've just had this constitutional overcreep. And so what I've said is my second piece of legislation, because I've already written my first piece of legislation. It's out on my website, and it's to deal with censorship by social media. And it's in Senate format, and it is written so it could be dropped on the leader's desk or podium the first day and could be sent to committee or voted on. I mean, it's in format. Second piece will be to defund the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. There are a lot of reasons for it, but first of all, they're not outlined in the Constitution. I challenge you to find the word education or labor in the Constitution. You can do a word search on it. I do it all the time to prove things to people. But those are also duplicative or redundant. We've got one in every state, so we don't need them. And if we got rid of them, we would not miss a beat. I like to say that your kids will come home still upset that they've got too much homework, still complaining about their teachers, still complaining about what they had at school lunch. But we wouldn't miss a beat, and we could take that money and cut taxes. We could pay down some of the humongous debt. We could shore up Social Security or Medicare. There's a lot of things to do with it, but that's just a start. I mean, we've got commerce, interior, agriculture, health and human services. I mean, you could go down the list. And I'm not suggesting that some of the things that these departments or agencies do aren't required. They're just not required to be done by the federal government.
Right.
The ancillary benefit of doing this is we basically wipe out the deep state, because the deep state, it's like if you get rid of the whole Department of Education, we don't have to go around and point to Steve and say, is he a deep stater or are you a deep stater, George? We just get rid of everybody and they go get jobs in the private sector or within state government, whatever. We get rid of them. So there's that ancillary benefit of getting rid of that deep state, because the deep state, I like to say, is kind of like an alien that you see in movies. It's fed by, two things. In movies, it's, eating humans or seawater or lava or something crazy like that. The deep state is fed by two things: the money that Congress allocates to it, and then something called the Administrative Procedure Act, or the APA. And very few people understand the APA and what it is, but it was signed into law in 1946, right after the war. And it basically outlines how the executive branch takes laws that are passed to it from the legislative branch and makes them real in terms of the way those laws are managed and implemented upon us. And little do people know that there are administrative courts in all of these agencies and departments. There's no due process. There's no right to a trial by jury. And there's no right to a speedy trial. And so they grind people down. Justice Gorsuch wrote a great book called The Republic If You Can Keep It, and it should be required reading for every voter, because it explains all of this. And if more people understood, they would be heading to Washington. I don't know what they'd be heading to Washington to do, but if they realized how bad this is. So we've got to, I've basically said we either need to radically retool the APA or we just need to abolish it entirely, because it is a progressive's dream come true.
Right. Mark, if I could interject on that, And being a CPA, I know about that with tax court and different things, and a small businessman knows about that when he deals with EPA or OSHA or whatever. But that's a great speech for the small businessman. I think maybe for your average person who just works at Ford making cars or a restaurant, but I think that would be a speech and a spiel to the small business owners who understand the rules and regs that they're killing us by. And when I go into Mark's and different places and I wasn't wearing a mask, they would say, "Oh well, private property." I keep telling them, listen here, pal. Private property in the United States is dead in the sense that there are so many rules, regulations that's the definition of fascism. It's personal ownership but government control. Right. Try putting up a stupid fence in your backyard and see what you get from the city, or try doing something signage without a building permit, whatever. Well, if it's not a permanent fixture, we don't need a building permit if you're just painting. But if you are, but then a lot of that has to do with getting more real estate taxes because they could up your value, different things. So I just want to read the 10th Amendment because I think it's so critical for all people to understand that technically our state Constitution and our state representatives should be the highest law in the land for our day-to-day living.
Absolutely. Other than those 3 or 4 things that we talked about.
I disagree. I believe there's probably about 6 or 7, but that's okay. That's okay. We don't.
I'm a sales guy by nature, right? So I'm going to go in hard and, compromise. So.
The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. But a lot of people don't realize the 9th Amendment is a great corollary to that. This is the 9th Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So I talked to a fellow who's on the organization is called the 10th Amendment Committee, and he said, we actually do incorporate the 9th Amendment in as a corollary because, the two working together are pretty powerful.
Here's what you hear from the progressive left, though, and I hear it all the time on social media, that the 10th Amendment really doesn't mean anything.
Oh, yeah, the courts have said that already, too.
Right. So we just need to take it back, and, we've got people legislating from the bench, not following, textually or contextually. It's problematic, right? We talk about packing the court. I mean, you think it's bad now. If we pack the court, it would be exponentially worse.
Right, and we had talked about this before the show started, and we got about 10 more minutes left, 9 more minutes. This was about Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution. Right. This is about the judicial powers. It's pretty lengthy, this Section 2. Most of the sections are a lot shorter. The judicial powers shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, and this was talking about the Supreme Court, to all cases infecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between 2 or more states, between a state and a citizen of another state, and it goes on and on and on. Then it goes at the end, it's pretty lengthy about cases affecting ambassadors and those kind of things. In all other cases, besides original jurisdiction, before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under regulations as the Congress shall make. So everything besides original jurisdiction can be controlled by Congress. Sure. So even if Biden gets 13 Supreme Court number, 15 with the majority being packed with another 4 or 6, if Congress exercise their authority, and I've talked to several scholars, and they said that the reason Congress doesn't use that often, they use it in the case of some of the issues relating to Guantanamo Bay, because they're fundamentally cowards and they're fundamentally politicians, and they want to say, oh, well, I tried, but the court ruled against me, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Right. There's not a damn thing I could do. My answer to those people is you're either lazy, ignorant, stupid, or a coward, or a combination. Right. People need to get off their butts. We need to control the courts. That's why we have elected representatives promoting legislation that the people want. We don't need the courts being legislators.
I think it's interesting, the first few sentences or phrases of that. really speak to those enumerated powers, right? Because they're talking about ambassadors, they're talking about admirals. It's like protect the country, deal with foreign. I mean, they're focusing on what they believe the business of the federal government should be. And Alexis de Tocqueville wrote. I mean, I know you're aware of him.
Yes.
He was a great commentator on the U.S. and had a great love for our democracy. And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we are successful in our democracy in the U.S. And that this time, I think he wrote it, we had about 24 states, that it was a thin web of control. It was, as I like to say, it was just enough to keep us inside the guardrails. But that was it. And he talked about how bureaucracies in Europe were grinding down and killing, the citizen. And that's exactly where we've gotten. I mean, he's rolling in his grave right now.
Right. If I could make one comment about Democracy in America by de Tocqueville, and, Tucker Carlson talks about democracy. I think when they say it that way, like democracy in America, I think they're talking about the democratic process of elections and different things. And I had the same conversation with Mike Gibbons 2 years ago.
Yep.
We are a republic, and obviously you know that.
Right.
And my argument to that is, I understand the slip of the tongue, or it's colloquial and whatever. But the problem is, look, if I'm a citizen, and if we're quote a democracy, wouldn't the Democrats have a better understanding? Forgetting all the stuff, the progressivism that they're promoting. Let's say this was more effective argument 10 or 15 years ago. If we're a democracy, why are the Republicans pushing republicanism or whatever they're pushing? So I pledge allegiance, and we know that, to the republic for which it stands. So just as a clarification, I went through this with a couple other people, because as we keep reinforcing that that's a democracy, I think that puts different things in people's minds.
Being a democratic republic, and
Right.
Your point goes to what the founding fathers were concerned about, the tyranny of the majority.
Right.
And there's a lot of examples of that.
You think?
Yeah.
But, Mark, before we got, Mr. Producer indicates we've got 5 minutes left. I just want to thank you for, number one, coming on the show, but I do want to remind you that most people don't realize that Ohio is actually qualified and classified as an agricultural state. And the foundation of our agricultural history lays in the county fairs in the different counties. Even Cuyahoga County still has one. My guess would be all 88 counties probably have something, if not maybe 70, but I guess all 88. So that's a great venue for meeting people.
We'll be there.
Yeah, and I like the idea about your RV. You could park right outside the fairgrounds. Just,
exactly. That's the whole thought about it.
When you're hot and sweaty, you could take a break, take a shower, take a nap, and then go back in for the next wave of people.
Well, that's where I met Rob Portman, not at the county fair, but I met him. He was traveling around an RV back in 2010.
Oh, was he?
That's the first time I met Portman. So,
was he driving it?
I doubt he was driving it, but
I'll be driving it.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Did you and he buy elephant ears together?
Yeah,
Bob over elephant ears, Steve.
Corn dogs.
Well, we really do appreciate you coming in, Mark.
I appreciate you.
Why don't you tell the voters why, in the last minute or so that we have here, why they should vote for you?
They should vote for me because, like I've said to them many times, I'm doing this because they can't. And I don't mean that they're not qualified. They are qualified. I'm doing this because I've been fortunate. God has placed me in this point where I'm healthy. I've got my nest egg in the bank, and I can go to Washington and do this. And quite frankly, I don't care what anybody says about me. I got a really thick skin. And they can't go because they're raising families, they're building businesses, they're getting educated, and they need someone to go represent them who wants to serve, not prosper. I've already said I'm not taking the salary, I'm giving that to charity.
Wow.
I've also said that when it comes to speaking fees, book deals, or any lobbying fees, I'm giving those to charities for the rest of my life, not just while I'm in office, because people are concerned about, well, you'll write a book and you'll get the big advance, and that's how you'll cash in. I've committed to that. I'd put it in writing. People can sue me because I have absolutely zero desire to prosper from this. It's to really go serve and then encourage other people to do that.
Great.
Right, and you know what I like about that is the citizen legislator, or the people coming out from the rank of the individuals who, like you say, are doing other things, and they're not necessarily in a position to do so, especially when the race might be tens of $1 million
Right.
in the aggregate. But what I like about candidates or politicians, they should be like my attorney, who isn't, in the sense that most attorneys are not zealous advocates for their clients.
Right.
You, as our U.S. Senator, I hope I'm paraphrasing this correctly, you will be our zealous advocates for the citizens of Ohio and our rights as individuals living in Ohio, along with the rights of the state of Ohio under the 9th and 10th Amendment.
And I want to trust me, I want to take the federal government down by 50 to 75%. We got big problems, big solutions needed. That work's coming back to Ohio.
Right.
We've got to be able to catch that work. And I worry about our state right now and ODJFS and Mike DeWine's leadership. I mean, someone's got to be able to manage that work that's going to be sent back.
That's markforohio.com. I want to make sure I get that in.
Yep.
Markforohio.com to find out more about candidate Mark and what he's going to do as being a representative for the people.
All right, great. That was Mark Pukita, candidate for U.S. Senate. We're looking forward to see you on the campaign trail, and safe travels. Thanks.